Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me at AdTech. It's a real privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to be in Bangalore. The first question everybody asks me here is this your first time in Bangalore? And am I giving off like a first time in Bangalore vibe or something? This is actually my 5th or 6th time here. I love coming to India. The energy of the people here and on the IBM team is just fantastic, and I got a chance to meet with some of you today. I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my beliefs of how social media is affecting people, us, and organizations, our brands, the groups that we belong to. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of the work that my team's been doing at IBM, and I hope we find it useful. So I've always had an interest in communications technology. You can see me figuring out some early communications technology here with 1978, this is my phone. I'm also next to a very high-tech toaster from the time. I've always had this interest in technology, and you can see it goes right from the phone onto Twitter there. I've spent about 11 years at IBM. Prior to that, I was a journalist. I was a journalist in the beginning of the dot-com boom. I worked for a consumer electronics website where we wrote reviews of consumer electronics, this kind of thing. And then I came to IBM about 11 years ago working in IBM's research division, where I learned a lot about what it means to try to engage audiences, where I learned a lot about what it means to intersect people and technology. Because at that time, I was working on IBM's intranet. I also ran IBM's IBM.com site for IBM's research division, but primarily I was interested in how people in IBM's research division were collaborating and communicating. So I've always sort of had this interest in the way people and technology interface, so I think I'm in the right, sort of in the right line of work here. Now, I want to ask you all a question that may seem a little bit strange, a little bit of a kind of lofty question for a marketing and advertising conference. And the question is, how do we reconcile ourselves as individuals, so as individual people, versus ourselves as members of a group? And this may seem sort of unconnected to the work that we do as advertisers or marketers or communicators or even technologists, but I think that this is sort of the fundamental question that we as individuals need to answer and that we as brands need to answer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this tension that's arising due to the changes that we're experiencing in a socially and digitally connected world, okay? So first of all, I want to step way back and talk about a concept called singularity. Have people heard of singularity? Like 2 of you. Okay, no problem. Singularity is, you'll recognize it once I tell you. Singularity is this idea that ultimately, computers are all going to be connected, and they're going to be smarter than we are, okay? And smarter than we are by, meaning people, people as individuals will be outpaced by technology in terms of intelligence. And, you can see with all your data moving into the cloud and all of the interactions that you have online, and all of the knowledge that's being stored, everything from Wikipedia entries to entries in CRM databases and systems, that all of this information, all this data is becoming super, super hyper-connected, and the data itself is becoming intelligent. So you could see how this is a possible future for us, that sort of human individual intelligence and capability will be eclipsed by something that's sort of like a great big intelligence. Now, unfortunately, the popular media usually represents the singularity like this. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger beaming in from Skynet to the future, from the future to come and kill you, and it's, the evil singularity and the massive intelligence. Or it's Arthur C. Clarke's, HAL 9000. That's also going to be the super intelligence that's going to somehow disrupt and harm the humans. And in fact, just sort of a side note, I heard once that Arthur C. Clarke named it HAL because he wanted it to be one step ahead of IBM. So alphabetically, HAL, H-A-L, was one step of, okay, anyway. So I don't take it personally. I'll let him have it. But I think there's an alternate, there's alternate views of what this future can be. And this is a screenshot from a really terrible film that I sort of love, Steven Spielberg's AI. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like terribly corny, but there's this, the end of the movie, I won't spoil it for you, but let's just say the end of the movie, you have a notion of the singularity that is really beautiful and positive, where the representation of collective intelligence is an angel and this kind of benevolent race of superhuman robots that replace us one day. So I think there's a lot of, there's also a very beautiful side to this and a lot of potential for it. And in fact, I work for a company, IBM, that is very cognizant of the potential of networked intelligence to create what we call cognitive computing. And that can bring a great amount of benevolent value to humanity. And in fact, last year we developed a computer called IBM Watson. It's actually a system called IBM Watson that was able to beat human contestants at a very, very complex game called Jeopardy, where the clues, in order to answer the clues, there are often puns and wordplay, and there's a very, very broad base of knowledge that's required. And that seems sort of like a little bit of a media stunt or just to show off the power of our computing. But now we are applying, the reason why I feel so optimistic about this future is we're now actually applying the technology from Watson to help doctors and nurses do much more accurate diagnoses of people who are in need. So they're actually able to use this questioning and answering system to gain a tremendous advantage in terms of rendering healthcare. So, so that's a singularity. You can either think that it's going to end up being the evil Borg, or you can think it's going to be a positive outcome. And I'm hoping to persuade you that you all have a role in which way we're going to go with that. So I always like to quote one of my favorite philosophers of all time, the famous Ben Kenobi. He's not only a philosopher, he's a Jedi Knight. This notion of singularity is kind of like an energy field created by all living things that surrounds us and penetrates us, and it binds the galaxy together. And you can either see it as sort of like the positive force, or you can see it as the evil empire. And I choose to see it as the positive force, and I hope you will too, because I think all of the things that we do, all of these little additions, every tweet, every Facebook update, and particularly for this group of people in the room here who are technologists and marketers, every digital experience that we create, I think is equivalent to a protein in a strand of DNA that could add up to this. So I think this, it's more like creating a baby, it's more like creating a person. So we have tremendous influence in this outcome. So I want to talk a little bit about your role as an individual, our role as individuals, before I talk about our roles as the managers of brands. So in my office in New York City, we have IBM set up what we call the Digital Design Lab in Midtown Manhattan. And one of the things we do is we try to create digital marketing and communications experiences on behalf of IBM that are really geared around the people who will use them, whether it's a website or an iPad app or whatever. The work that we're doing, we try to build it around individuals. So one of the things that we do, and this is, take this as a tip if you like, one of the things that we do is before we design, we try to come up with what we call user personas. And these are just a couple of examples where we really debate who's the kind of person who's going to use this program. So here's an example of one. This is Larry, the ambitious line of business manager. And he may have certain ambitions or needs that would require us to build a certain kind of functionality or user interface. Or it could be Alex, who's the under pressure IT director. We probably have a few IT directors in here who are under pressure from your client to deliver. Or Frank, the forward thinker. Maybe as you're engaging in social media for your brand, you're thinking, oh, we'd really like to reach these influencers and experts. Well, you can't just design an experience without really getting into the head of one of these people. Or like Charles, the CMO. IBM, as you may know, has a very, very significant portfolio of offerings for CMOs And if we are going to try to engage with CMOs, we need to sort of get into the head of a CMO and think about how they would interact with IBM's digital experience. And so anyway, so we have this notion of these different kinds of personas underlying different kinds of individuals. But meanwhile, there's something that's happening, I think, across all of these kind of individuals. One of the things that's changing, there's several, but one of the things that's changing for individuals in a socially and digitally connected environment is the permanence of the record. The permanence of the record. So when you go and have some kind of activity online, whether you're posting an image or tweeting or whatever, there's a sense of permanence that is really new for the human experience. Another thing is the velocity at which that information can travel. And this is, again, this is something that's pretty new for human experience. The information about you as an individual can travel quickly and faster than ever before in history. And another thing is it's the visibility into who you are connected to. So other people, so this is this notion of transparency, other people understand you in a way that has historically never happened before. So this creates a lot of tensions, frankly, for individuals. And meanwhile, I think there is an underlying characteristic for all these personas that is people are really driven to do the right thing. And I call this persona Ethan the existentialist. I think that fundamentally, and I might be diverting from the IBM point of view here a little bit and just telling you about my point of view, but fundamentally, people are driven to do the right thing. And in fact, this is something that drew me to IBM because I do actually think IBM has this belief as well. We have a sort of values-based management culture, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But I think underlying all of these individuals is a sense that people want to do something that is meaningful. That's the notion of existentialism, that life actually does have meaning, but it's the meaning that you bring to it. And this is typically defined, people, whether they call themselves existentialists or they're religious or whatever, this is typically the way people think about their own values. So how do I decide what is right? Okay, so all of these factors are at play for the individual. And I would say also, these factors are at play for groups as well. So I put an asterisk next to the word group because I mean, I think the group can mean a number of different things. So it could mean, for example, your family as a group, or the community that you live in, or I think probably, or the nation that you live in. But I think probably most specifically for this group of people, it's the company that you're working for, the organization, the brand that you represent. And these factors of data permanence and the velocity of data and the volume of data are also at play for brands. And this creates a significant tension, I would say, in terms of trying to manage the overlap between personal and organizational values. Okay, so we've, I think, historically thought about values in a kind of simplistic way, almost like kind of concentric circles with the individual in the middle, and then maybe outside of that you have the family, and outside of that the company or the nation, et cetera. But I think it's getting a lot more complicated than that, because there's a notion of the individual having to integrate it all. I call this the meta-individual, because the individual has to synthesize the value systems, the expectations for behaviors for all of these. And why am I on this whole riff about values and behaviors? It's because all of your behaviors are evident to the people and organizations that you belong to, the people who you affiliate with and the organizations you belong to, in a way that is historically completely new, right? Because of social media, your behaviors, you even unwittingly demonstrate your behaviors to people who you may or may not even know, okay? So I think that the environment, the values environment, is a lot more complicated. It looks a lot more like this. So this is actually an image of a fractal. And a fractal is it's kind of a data visualization. And it was invented by a fellow IBMer, this guy named Benoit Mandelbrot. a scientist from IBM. He's really famous for having come up with this idea of fractals. This is the basis of all of our, basically any digital media that you see, any visualization that you see, fractals are sort of at the core of it. But what I like about fractals in terms of talking about the environment in which humans and individual humans and organizations are existing in social media is that there's an infinite number of overlaps within a fractal. No matter how deeply you drill down, there's always another version of the fractal. And the same thing goes when no matter how far you zoom out of a fractal, there's always another layer there. And I think that's a better analogy for how complicated it is for individuals and brands in a socially and digitally connected world. In fact, the key word that comes to mind for me here is integrity. And the word integrity it literally means keeping it together, keeping something whole. And I think individuals are feeling a tremendous amount of consternation and stress just trying to integrate to maintain integrity in this environment. And I think brands are struggling with the same thing. And in fact, my hypothesis is that the more pressure and control that brands try to exert into this environment, the more they're deluding themselves, frankly. It's very, very difficult because it's so complex. And so what's happening, I think, is what you could call cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is when you have a firmly held belief, but you're surrounded by evidence that is contrary to that. And so for the individual, we have an outdated notion of privacy. Like our notion of privacy and what belongs to us and what information about us we own it's not a very sophisticated or contemporary notion. And I'm not saying privacy is over or that privacy is bad. What I'm saying is something bigger has happened. Something bigger has happened. And for brands and for groups, the cognitive dissonance comes from this obsolete sense of control. So our desire as brand managers, as marketers, as advertisers, to control a message or to control the behaviors of employees or to control the behaviors of our clients or of our prospects, that has gone out the window. So this is creating a great deal of consternation. So the question is to you all, to my colleagues here, I heard somebody mention the phrase, the fraternity of marketers. I think fraternity only gets about half the room here. But the community of marketers, I think the question is, what's it going to be? Are we going to create systems and are we going to try to manage our brands and our companies and ourselves in a way that creates dissonance or in a way that creates integrity? That's the choice for us. So, have you guys all seen one of these? I hadn't. Okay. If I were giving this speech in the United States, I think I would be showing a softball or something. So indulge me in a little visual metaphor here. So this is, as I'm sure you know, this is a cricket ball. Nice thing about a cricket ball is it's very regular on the outside. It has a lot of integrity. It's very clear what the surface is, and what's inside of it. The bad thing about it, I'd say, is it's a little bit plain. There's not much variety there. Okay. So now, on the other hand, you have a bag of marbles. So bag of marbles, a little bit less integrity, sort of loosely coupled there by that net bag, but there's a lot of variety. And a lot of potential energy, kinetic energy, motion inside of there, a lot of different colors there. So now, if you took these two things, the bag of marbles on the one hand and the cricket ball on the other, and you drop them into a bucket of water, they would displace the same amount of water. So these two things have the same amount of volume. But I want to know from you guys, which one has more surface area? How do you know? Okay, before you guys yell it out, let me just give you the cheat sheet here. Okay, so just take a second. That's the formula for computing the surface area of a sphere. Okay, I see a couple people. All right, you want to try again? The marbles. Okay, yes, there you go. He's got his pen out, I saw. Okay. So you're right. So it turns out that the marbles have about 300% more surface area. And I'm not actually very good at math. I had a friend of mine who's a mathematician help me compute that. But anyway, the reason why I say this, it seems kind of random again, like maybe my brain is a little bit random today, but in an era where data is king, where there's nothing you can do about the volume of data, it is increasing unbelievably. In fact, 90% of the data generated by humankind was generated in the last 2 years. It's kind of phenomenal, but it's true. You have companies sitting on exabytes of data. So in an era where data is king, you want to have, I believe, you want to have a social media plan for your brands that generate the most possible interactions, that create the most possible opportunity to sense and respond to threats, to opportunities, to the diverse character of your clients. And so my hypothesis here is that you would want to have something a little bit more like the bag of marbles, which honors diversity, than the cricket ball, which honors consistency. Now, it's difficult as marketers. We manage your social media presence in a federated way. And what I mean by that is one of the things we did at IBM is we created a social media policy back in 2006. This is some work that my team and I did. We literally put a blank wiki up on our intranet and invited people from across IBM to write our social media policy for us. And more than 200 people contributed to it, and we ended up with a really fine document. In fact, it's on IBM.com, and you're welcome to take a look at it. And this is the kind of document that what it does is it gives people not only permission, but some instruction about the etiquette online. And what we're doing here is we are co-authoring the ground rules. So rather than trying to centralize IBM's social media presence, we are trying to create an abundance of diversity and actual interactions with IBM experts, interactions with people who want to come work for IBM, people who want to work with IBM, interactions with our customers. We're stimulating that. I also believe that the winningest organizations will create systems of engagement rather than channels of distribution. And this is another one that's very hard for us to wrap our head around as marketers. I think we have a kind of long history of a competence in creating beautiful content, aggregating the biggest audience possible in front of it, and then distributing it, interrupting with the message. But I would say that what's changing here is we've moved from a battle for eyeballs and audience into a battle for engagement. And if you're going to win that, you have to create systems of engagement. You cannot fake it. So, one of the things that we've done at IBM is we've been working on promoting a social media program at IBM, a social enterprise social web strategy that is all about enabling our subject matter experts in the areas that we go to market in. So our cloud computing experts, our analytics experts, our smarter commerce experts, our social business experts. So we're enabling them, and to the extent that we're using platforms like Facebook or Twitter, we're trying to use them rather than as a way to distribute media. We're trying to use them as a place to generate interactions. And in fact, I have one of my colleagues here, Shiva Kumar, is really an expert at doing this. I hope you'll get a chance to shake his hand and to meet him. We do every week on one of our most used social media channels, our Facebook page called People for a Smarter Planet, we have an IBM expert take over the page for a full day, and you can interact with whether it's a PhD engineer or one of our business leaders or a consultant on one of our topics of expertise. And we do this across Twitter and in LinkedIn and in other forums. But that's the point, is it's to the idea is to create a system of engagement as opposed to a channel for media distribution. And as you heard in the introduction, we're trying to figure out how to do that for a company with 500,000 people in it. So when you're talking about 500,000 people, not everybody's going to be good at it. Not everybody's going to be natural at it. So we've created a system called the Digital IBMer Hub on our intranet that has, it has teaching and courses and experiential learning powered by some light gamification to get people through it on cybersecurity, on how to present themselves on LinkedIn, on how to use Twitter. And that is sort of a feeder system into what we call the Forward Thinker program. And if you go onto IBM.com on our software page or on the Smarter Planet page, you'll literally see IBM experts on the page. And they're not hard-coded onto the page. They're being served up onto that page by a web service we've developed internally that draws on their social media presence. And they've gone through that training, and we know they're subject matter experts, and so we're creating more interactions with them. And then sort of the tip of the pyramid here is our IBM Select program, where we literally do some hands-on coaching for a small number of very, very sort of high-value experts within IBM. So you can see the program here, while we do a lot of work to manage our channels, manage the channels, like the IBM Twitter ID or the IBM India Twitter ID, et cetera. We do a lot of work to create really good, compelling content there. Our aspiration is to really emphasize engagement with individuals, because social media wouldn't be social without people. I think we often overemphasize the media part of social media. So, another example. The winningest organizations will engender a system of learning rather than declaring absolutes and defending them. And so one of the things, I was telling you a little bit about my office in New York, the IBM Digital Design Lab. One of the things we do there is we use a development process called Agile or Scrum. Have people heard of that? The developers in the room have, yeah. So typically Agile or there's different kinds of Agile development. There's extreme coding and Scrum, et cetera. It's typically a way to develop software. It's a software development practice that privileges learning. So you do very short iterations, and you observe the behaviors and outcomes, and then you do another version. So we deploy code like every 2 weeks. That's the kind of Agile philosophy, right? And it's a system of learning that produces value very quickly for us, but it also is very sort of humane, I think, because you have this, you have this very high level of engagement by the people there. But this is important that we're applying this method to marketing and communications. So we don't think it's just about software development, but we're trying to apply this agile development methodology to our marketing and communications program development. And it's a learning system, and it does create a lot of errors. It creates a lot of outcomes that we would like to change, but it gives us actually more control because we can change our direction very quickly. And I put up this slide here because sometimes it really does feel like we're losing our marbles. But all of those interactions, the marbles bouncing around, watching the data that comes off of it, how people behave in our systems, gives us the ability to learn quickly. And I think that this is, again, a foundational principle for social media management, is that you have to create learning systems. You have to create learning systems. You just cannot predict, there isn't a calculator big enough to predict how people will behave in social media environments. So, one more example, and then I'm going to play you a little film. The winningest organizations will invest in creating environments in which personal and organizational values can thrive together, and then the organization will lionize those who make it work. And so what do I mean by that? So remember how I was talking about this very complex environment in which our personal values and our organizational values overlap and sometimes conflict. The winningest organizations will find ways to attract people with values that are similar to the company's values, and then they'll make them stars. They'll let them thrive. And IBM, as you heard in the introduction, has just celebrated its 100th year in business. And one of the things that we did as part of our centennial celebration was we created an environment and encouragement for IBMers to do skills-based public service. There's some wonderful sound that's just beamed in. It's the video. Great. Okay, just a little early on that. That guy's running. Okay, anyway. There you go. Yes, more of that, please? Okay. So we've done a huge investment not only in creating and co-creating our values with our employees, our social media strategy, or rather policy with employees, but also in creating an environment in which IBMers want to do skills-based public service. And a couple weeks ago, I got an email on a Saturday from one of my team saying, there's this video you have to see. I'm not sure what we're going to do about it. It doesn't look very professional, but it's really good. And I looked at it, and it just made my heart swoon. So I want to play it for you. And if you can, please. Thank you. That's pretty cool, huh? The part that, first of all, I don't know what "Come Charlie Muban" means, but there, like 100 people wrote that in the comments. So what does it mean? Let's go? I don't know. Anyway, so that video, a couple things I want to point out about that from the point of view of a marketer, somebody who's thinking about creating a social media management system for a company, or a brand management system for a company. It was a third party, a group called the Ugly Indian that does this thing called spot fixing that made this video. So it mentions the IBMer. It says, "Thank you, IBMers." And there's something just, I mean, you can't, like if IBM said that, it would be kind of inauthentic in a way, but the fact that we worked with this other party to do it, any company can go and clean up. You know, I'm not saying, you know, you need a cleanup video or something. But what happened here was you had 60 IBMers who, they looked outside of their office. And they didn't say, let's clean up in front of our office. They said, let's look next door at the senior citizens' home, and let's clean up there. And they did very dirty work, right? And they put in 2 hours of their time. And in the course of about a week and a half, it got 175,000 views on YouTube, which is just phenomenal. It's like, you know, you would hope that an advertisement on TV would get that kind of view. The comments underneath it are just unbelievably positive and engaging. And so what we have here is we've created an environment in which IBMers, like all of those 60 people, and I had the privilege to meet a few of them yesterday, all of those 60 people can do that kind of public service in any context. They could do it on the weekend. They could do it in any context they want, but they chose to do it with their employer, with IBM. It was completely a volunteer effort. Nobody forced them to participate in this way. So I think what we've done is we've proved in a way, in a small way anyway, that when you create an environment in which your employees' values can mesh with your company values, you can have tremendous success in social media because you get this incredible credibility and authenticity that comes from it. And that leads to really engaging interactions online that represent the brand well. So just a final thought. Again, I would just want to come back and say that all of us as marketers and technologists are every little bit that we create. Like that little video is part of the DNA of this intelligence, this collective digital social intelligence that we're creating, the digital social human experience. We are all contributing. So this to me is like one DNA, one little bit that is going to create a better, more human, kind, and generous future. And this is my son, his name's Zev, and so I guess I'm just asking you, as you think about your kids, what kind of digital, social, human experience you want to create for them. And so I implore you, as my colleagues, to empower individual integrity, and that will create collective authenticity. So keep it real. Thanks.